Oh.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to stage 2, or phase 2, or our second series of Remote Product London. Really good to see some of the same faces back again, and welcome to anyone new. So just before we kick off, just some of the very gentle ground rules. If I could just ask everyone to be on mute throughout the talk, and please do fire your questions over to me. But what we'll do is we do Q&A at the end. So I just feel it really helps with the fluidity of the call if you can just sort of message me privately on the chat with your specific question. Please do make them clear, because I sometimes struggle to make them out. But yeah, if you could privately message me through the chat some really great questions to our speakers for the evening, and then at the end I will fire them across and ask them on your behalf. So two great speakers tonight. As I mentioned, we've got John Connolly, who is the Chief Product Officer, and Divya Hughes, who is the Director of Research of UX Research and Product Design, both from Receipts Bank. So without further ado, I'll hand you over, and yeah, look forward to it. Thank you.
Cool. So Divya, can you fire up the thing in your wob? So I recognize, well, Natalia, hi. So some of you may know me. I know some of you. I don't. And do, fire in the questions to the chat, and hopefully we can make this a bit interactive. We've got, much to Divya's shame, I edited the slides because we better knock some stuff out. So this is offensive to anyone with a design eye. We're going to see 10 things we've learned. We'll rattle through them and then hopefully get to the interesting Q&A at the end. The next slide just says what's already been said, who we are. It's some wonderful corporate shots of us. Divya, can you advance? There we are, looking wonderful. And then I'll do a little bit about Receipt Bank. So probably most of you dialed in because accounting is such an exciting area that we find that most of our employees join us because they've had a lifelong interest in bookkeeping and want to add to that space. And we have to try to manage the demand that we get from employees just because it's too sexy. It's neobanks, healthcare, all those things wish they had the problems we had, because bookkeeping is a life-affirming aspirational career. And in reality, most people run a mile. We have to try to not use the word bookkeeping half the time when we're interviewing people, because people just, oh, it must be the dullest crap on earth. But it's not. It's actually, the vast majority of people work in small businesses, and they don't have a clue what they're doing. They want to be a plumber, they don't know how to run a business. They want to be a carpenter, they don't know how to run a business. They're a physiotherapist, they just want to do their trade and get on. And bookkeepers are there to actually help them get through it. So they're these lovely, warm, compassionate people who help the vast majority of our GDP get on ahead. But it's very hard to get that through to people. But that's what Receipt Bank's involved in. We help bookkeepers and accountants work better with SMBs, making more SMBs able to get the help of a really great bookkeeper. Next slide, please. We're doing a half decent job of it. We regularly feature as being, a good company to work for. We're doing well financially. We've got Series C now. We raised, I think, a technical term, a shit ton of money, which turned out to be really good timing to have a shit ton of money right now. So apologies to anyone who is out raising money at the moment, because it must be bloody difficult. But we were very, very lucky. We raised it just towards the end of last year, and now have a whopping great big balance sheet, and also a decent P&L to go along with it. The next slide just says we're all over the place, in the positive sense of that word. So we're in Australia, Bulgaria, France, Canada, South Africa, the UK, US, which is very interesting from a COVID-19 perspective, because we were already having to deal with life on Zoom long before we had to work from home, because our engineering is remote from our product. The Canadian, US, French markets are all remote from the UK. So we're doing okay. The next slide gives some numbers that are now out of date. So we're in 8 countries, 400 people roughly working for the company, about 8,000 partners. It's much higher than that now. It's more like 10 or 11,000. And we've got about 200,000 SMBs. It's more like 250,000 to 300,000 now. But those numbers, when updated, sort of ruin the multiples of 2. So we're going to stick with these numbers until we get to new multiples of 2, and they look nice and symmetrical together. So the company's doing well enough. And then the next slide says that our key insights are in no particular order. We've picked 10 random things to share with you, and you can either say we're stupid or very insightful or something else. Both of us kind of feel a sort of, you know, we don't have any divine insights here. This is just literally things that we've screwed up and are getting wrong, rather than things that we're doing brilliantly. So please take it from that perspective. These are things that we've kind of done a bad job of and learned from, rather than saying that we're masters of. So on the first one then, I'm going to take the first one, and myself and Divya are going to sort of bat and ball. So the first one was, please fence me in. We are constantly overrun with things that are urgent, killing things that are important. I don't know about your own companies, but I'd imagine this is sort of endemic. So we're trying to deliberately set up fences so that people can be protected, that by limiting people on what they can do, they actually stand a better chance of getting to do what they want to do. So we've tried going through and having quotas. You know, 40% of all things will have to be on something new and big, 40% will be on continuous improvement, 20% will be on tech debt and other architectural things. Have we managed to maintain those ratios? Fuck no. No, they absolutely get blown out the window. And we say, well, we'll break it this quarter, but we'll pay it back next quarter. We've never paid it back next quarter. So then we've experimented with, well, we'll do what we didn't want to do. We'll say this team works on sexy stuff and this team works on boring stuff. You know, that way we'll protect innovation. Never wanted to do it, but having failed to sort of get the innovation pot protected when it's inside the core, we thought, well, maybe we'll do that. It's had a bit more success, not necessarily in motivating everyone, but in keeping some things fenced off, by actually not having people try to balance their time allocation or allocation within a team by having a team that has been separated off. We've seen a bit more success with that. Really, really difficult to do. It's a sort of first one, you know, set limits for yourself, set swim lanes, and try to make it so that you can't rob from yourself in the short term. That was number one. Number two, I'm going to flop over to Divya.
So to caveat almost what John said earlier about the title slide, and probably a good example of classic Hippo effect. That was entirely John. It was him coming and looking at a presentation and deciding to make some tweaks on the last minute, which is something that in most companies going from a startup to a scale up to whatever comes after that. It's a commonly felt pain. A visionary, a strong founder is often the one at the realm making decisions. It's been their innate gut instinct, that drive, that idea, their passion that has driven the company at the very early start. And the organization comes to depend on that. And soon you're in a position where you're growing the company, where the product team has gone from 3 people locked in a room with the co-founder to 40 of us trying to make sense of the world. And that single opinion that drives all decision making ceases to work. It stops being both useful, it stops being productive, it stops being something that you can scale. And we felt that very, very acutely in our early days. We had a very strong visionary co-founder who was sort of the champion of the product for a very long time and led a lot of the decision making. Coming into that legacy, when we've gone from that small, close-knit team to a bigger, much more ambitious team. The first thing we needed to address not the first thing, but one of the first things we needed to address was, how do you empower people to make decisions? How do you get to a point where you've got autonomy in inbuilt into the structure of the team, to the DNA of the product org. And we got a few things wrong, got quite a few things wrong. But one of the main things that we tried to mitigate for was giving enough control and sense of ownership to small cross-functional teams so that they felt both empowered and clear on how decision-making would look like without sort of looking to the highest paid person in the room. Also trying to kind of build mechanics and ways of working that supported that was very keen in how we tried to tackle the problem. That's not to say we didn't end up in meetings or with presentations where the Hippo effect didn't win out eventually. But I think accounting for it and making sure that there is a credible plan to mitigate for it was one of the things that we found very useful.
Our research department used to be taken up with explaining why seemingly great ideas, top-down ideas, didn't work. That was all research did, was basically say, well, the reason it's failed is this, because there was no need to do research in a Hippo world up front because you just knew it was correct. So the next point is, say it again. I spend all my day talking, more or less, and I'm so bored with hearing my own voice saying the same thing. But I even need to, thank you, Kat. I need to like get even more bored because I say the same thing 7 times, and the people I'm saying it to, each one of them only hears it once. You know, because I'm going and I'm saying it in this form and that form. And unless you're repeating things so that they're bored of them and they've got 1/7 the concentration you have for the most part of hearing the message, you're not getting it through. So I find however much I communicate, it is never enough. You can never repeat things enough. Why do we come to work? Who are we doing it for? What's important? I think you have to take a new level of pain of listening to the same thing being said again out of your mouth and increase it by an order of magnitude. Because the number of times I've heard people say, "Oh, you haven't heard that." It's like, well, geez, I hear it every single hour of my day. And they're like, "Yeah, but you only speak to us once a month." I was like, oh God, I have to read, you know. So I would say it again, keep saying it, repeat yourself. Don't come up with new frameworks and new ways to explain things. Just repeat the existing framework. Even though I think we as creative people need some change, if you can resist doing it and just repeat and keep pounding, communicating the same messages, I would do that. No one else is that interested, especially outside of other departments. If you change the message, it'll never sink in. So say it again till you're absolutely bored, senseless. Number 4. Over to you.
John's often used that as an excuse for getting out of why he made certain decisions, but we leave it as just 7 times is the magic number for repetition. The other thing which we didn't invest enough in early on, and I think we've course corrected to some extent over the last few months, is making sure that we weren't just building new features. There's a temptation, particularly in sort of SaaS businesses, to just build more, to add more features, more users, more revenue, and we think all of those things are related. And more is more. What we didn't spend enough time doing upfront was investing in adoption. So all of this great value that we've built, actually bringing users to see that value was a crucial part of the challenge that we ignored for too long. But more features, without necessarily having a credible plan to get users to see the value of their features, didn't really get us to where we needed to be. So it's sort of like swallowing a mouthful of dry biscuits. You can keep building more things and getting users to try and lap it up, but till you've credibly invested in how you're going to see that growth, both in the value perception, but also in actually getting users to see that. So I think our lesson learned was to really double up our efforts in adoption of things we build, rather than just continuing to build more and more on top of each other. And we go next, John.
No,
we stay. Yeah.
we decided to break steps so people wake up.
Yeah. Just it's a pattern breaking mechanic, which is very similar to what we wanted to do with decision making by committee. By no means a problem isolated to product or to design in any way, but when I started, we didn't have a design or a research function. Quite like what John said, research was basically trying to prove all of the things that we've done are exactly what they should have done. And it was sort of a bit of an exercise in self-congratulation. So getting to break some of those patterns, getting to break some of the habits requires assigning clear ownership on decision making. And often that means that decision making happens by committee. And anyone that's ever tried to do anything by committee knows that tends to fall apart very quickly. So that disbanding a committee or decision by committee doesn't mean that you give up on collaboration entirely. Quite the opposite. I think collaboration is most successful if there's a mechanic to ensure that there is a clear decision maker at the end of any process. And we learned that very quickly, that collaboration cannot come at the cost of trying to do everything by committee, which can A, slow you down, and B, make you want to pull your hair out.
So the next one, True North. I don't know how many of you, it's like some of you maybe have done everything right from the beginning and maybe doing it all right now, but having a true North Star metric rather than just another metric has been really bloody hard for us to get to. And even when we said, oh, this is our new North Star, they're like, we'll just add it. I was like, no. And then someone said, oh, but it doesn't change very often, so we shouldn't really look at it. It's like, how would we have a North Star metric that we don't look at? What the? So, so do try to get people to actually look at a number that means something when it goes up and means something when it goes down, rather than has an instant explanation that says, oh, don't worry about that because of this. And the number of metrics that people have where there's always a one-liner that comes afterwards as to why you shouldn't care about it, just proving that it going up or down means nothing. The metric either is telling you news that no one wants to hear and people are able to shy away from, or just has no power whatsoever. So do get a good North Star metric in place. Do make sure that finance give a shit about it and it's not just product that cares about it. And do make it a North Star for the entire company. And if it's revenue, I'm sure there's a very good headhunter available on this call who can help you find a better job. Revenue is not a great North Star metric in terms of stuff, but the number of people who don't really see beyond that is quite fascinating. So it's taken us a long time to actually get a good North Star metric that people care about. And one of the things that got in the way of us having a good North Star metric was that we had sort of set ourselves up with a pricing model that didn't very well align with a good North Star metric. And the more friction you have between your pricing model and a North Star metric that aligns with longer term value and customer value, the harder time you will have with it. So it helped us a lot when we brought our revenue model closer in line with our customer success, closer in line with our product success. Then everyone could suddenly agree and see the light. It was a very painful process. And there's a tendency sometimes to just kind of skip the most important question and move on to question 2. No idea where we're going, but let's just start going there. And it sounds stupid when you say it like that. And you're like, well, who the fuck would be dumb enough to do that? But the reality is you kind of end up doing that because you're given a job. And you're like, well, let's just look like we're busy. So we'll keep being busy. And sometimes you can skip over that thing. So if you do currently operate and don't have a good North Star metric in place or don't have consensus on what that North Star metric should be, dig your heels in a little bit more and make sure you get to one, because it's probably causing you all sorts of problems all over the place, just not head on, to just sort of sprouting up like weeds around the sides. Next one, Divya.
When a lot of us have been in sort of meetings that start with a competitor has a feature, a competitor has a capability, and therefore we must have it. Sales cannot sell it, sales cannot do anything till we build this miraculous thing that will change everything. And for a lot of companies, for us, for a very long time, our roadmap was driven very much by we'll just build this other thing, and that will solve all of our problems. We'll just build all of these other things, and revenue will suddenly start pouring in. And it's very tempting to be led into that because it sort of takes the onus of outcomes away from product. It means that you're sort of just delivering on a commercial agenda, something that the sales team tells you is going to definitely make you money, and without it, the product can never sell itself. And while having that channel, having that communication and collaboration with the commercial org is invaluable, being directly led can often be misleading. And we found that was often the case. That features that we built, solutions to problems that we thought were massive, ended up not quite getting us where we thought we would. And a large part of that was also not being able to then ring fence, as we sort of talked about earlier on, enough of our own breadth, our own capacity to do the things that would really move the dial. So what we end up with is a product that's sort of conflated with a whole number of things that we thought would be useful, and then just end up making a product quite almost hard to use or hard to navigate around. So the thing that we learned, actually, as important as it is to build features, it's probably equally important to be able to kill features, to kill some pet projects, to kill some of the great ideas that circulate around. To temper a roadmap with a healthy dose of strategy, so it isn't just a bucket list of items that you get from the powers to be. We also learned that it's not always valuable to build everything that you're asked for, but in fact test 5 ideas and then decide to execute or build one of them. I don't think we fully made that journey to getting to that point yet, but it is what we endeavor to do.
There was somebody at a product event a while back, and she stood up and she said, "Look, we're all good at learn quick, kill fast, etc." She said, "When did you last kill a product? Tell the truth." And the answer, everyone was never. And the other thing was, she says, like, if you're only doing discovery on one thing, who's going to have the balls to say, okay, let's not do it, it's crap? You're going to put it through to development, because they're all doing like, what will we do next? So, it's only when we get enough balls in the hopper in discovery that there's actually a chance that we're going to shoot something and say, no, kill these 4 ideas. There's no fucking way we can do them all. But we were doing, and sometimes still do, quite linear, 1 in discovery to go 1 in development, with no opportunity to discover that the thing in discovery is crap. Our job shouldn't be, is this good or bad? It's just, is this the best versus something else? It's stack ranking, not trying to get to absolute truth. So if you do find that you're not killing stuff, or you do find that you're have a ratio of 1-to-1 discovery to development, there's probably a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy in there.
John has also, it's worth mentioning that John has said this 7 times. This was his 8th time repeating that. So it's definitely true to his own advice. Yeah.
So the next thing then is innocent until guilty. So very few of us get to actually do the luxury of starting the project from scratch. Most of us step in the middle. We become the CPO of a company because the company wants somebody new, or someone else says, I'm done with this shit, and they move on, and you pick it up. Who knows what it is, okay? But you generally come in the middle. And you've got to do 2 things. You've got to, earn the right to lead. You've got to actually get some stuff done. You can't go straight into existential doubt going, well, I don't know if we should do this. And like, we're a money remittance platform, remit money, and get more of it done. You gotta go, well, is money good? I don't know, So you can't go into existential doubt. You've got to earn the right to lead by actually getting some stuff done. But at some point, you're not the new guy, you're the old guy, and all of the bad decisions of the past, they're now all yours. And someone's going to say, sorry, why do we do this? And you go, I don't fucking know why we do it. And you go, well, it's your product. And you're like, yeah, well, I never really stood back and thought, why do we do this? I just like it was there when I came in, So I just kind of kept on going with it. And at that point, you're screwed. So you are innocent when you start off, and you do need to earn the right to lead, but then you become guilty. All of the old decisions become yours. You need to address the existential questions at some point. You need to be able to say, why are we doing this? Not just, I've done more of what we used to do. And I would say, if you write somewhere in your notebook, your days from being innocent to guilty and how you're going to transition from one to the other. And interestingly, no one will ask you to do it. Like there's loads of things people will ask you to do, and you get daily reminders, this thing's broken, can you fix it? And you'll never forget to do those things because everyone else is pushing you to do it. Nobody else is pushing you to really question the direction you're heading in or what it is you're doing, until at some point some really sort of big thing comes up, probably from completely left field, and then you go, oh, I don't know, maybe we'll ask the guy who left 3 years ago who you sacked because he was incompetent, because he made all of the decisions. So that can't be your answer. So watch out that transition from innocent to guilty, and make sure that you do actually, whilst paying the gods of earning the right to lead, that you then actually do start leading. And this sort of links back a bit to the North Star question as well, which is, if you haven't really got that nailed in place, then you probably haven't answered some of the things that you're going to need to answer as you become the guilty party. And then on to the next one. Called number 11, but not really. It's number 9.
It's still you, John.
It's still with me. There we go. So this is a good one. Sorry, apologies.
I can't be responsible for terrible numbering of slides.
Yes.
I will not take responsibility.
So this is one of the things that I wish I was better at doing, and I haven't been good at doing, but I wish I was. So you start off with a very horizontal product. Like we have a super horizontal product. It could be used for anything. Like we have people approach us and go, well, could you extract, healthcare and claims or insurance claims? And go, no. Yes, we have an ability to do things with documents, but we're focused on SMBs and the relationships with bookkeepers and accountants and vice versa. That's what we're doing. We have loads and loads of things that we're able to do. And we picked up some customers in the early days that reflect that massive horizontal spread. And of course, they've got revenue next to them. But we have to say goodbye to some of them, because as we grow, we're not going to hold on to this massive horizontal. We need to pick some sort of focus, some sort of segment focus. And that means sacking some customers. I think there's far better podcasts than me saying, you've got to sack some of your customers. There's no end of sort of hyper growth one saying sack some customers. But God, is it bloody hard to do. As you explained to the CFO, there's 5 to 20% of your revenue that you want to not grow, and in fact to go backwards. And then they explain to you, well, that's a drag on growth, John. Like if they don't grow, that means everything else has to grow even faster. And if they go backwards, then I got to fill that gap. So yes, everything else has to grow faster because they're not going to grow, and everything has to grow even faster because you're going to get rid of that revenue. But not sacking those customers makes all other customers suffer. You're trying to feed all of the puppies and they all starve to death. You've got to drown some of the puppies. Sounds horrible, and it creates as much emotion in the company because there's somebody who it's his revenue. He's like, but I do that, John. That's my job. I'm the head of non-strategic revenue. And you're like, yeah. I'm going to get rid of that area. They'll defend it massively. Everyone else wants you to keep it because it was contributing to growth. But if you keep it, it's going to defocus all the R&D efforts. It's going to stop the product growing into what it should be. And it's going to stop you putting enough resource into the other areas to remain world class. We've really struggled to do this, to sack some segments, to leave some behind. When you're in the SMB space, everyone wants you to go into SME space because they've got more money to spend. Can you just do this or just do that? But this customer has got loads of money. It's like, yeah, but if I start servicing larger business sizes, that twists my roadmap. If I start doing some wholesale deals, that twists my roadmap. So being able to identify and sack whole segments, incredibly hard to do. You're going to need to have an awful lot of buy-in to do it. But failing to do it just makes you less obviously, but average for everyone. And you kind of slowly become you become irrelevant to all of the segments rather than being explicitly deciding which segments you don't want to be relevant. 2, did we do that process very well? I'd say no. It's very easy to do it when things are growing. When things are really, really growing very fast, that's the time to do it. When things slow down a bit, no one's interested in doing it. It probably won't be top of your mind when things are growing really, really fast. So whilst things are growing really, really fast, put this on your agenda, kill them off, and you'll have a much happier and nicer life. The last one, and then we can bring you to questions, is wolf, goat, chicken. Chicken, goat, wolf. This is a reference to, that wonderful, how do you get the chicken seed across the bridge, and the goat eats the chicken and the wolf and all this stuff. So building up the team is so hard to get the right ratios in place. Suddenly you've got 3 product managers and 2 developers, and then the next thing you've got 50 developers and 4 product managers. It has been incredibly difficult for us to keep any sort of correct ratio of product manager to researcher to UXer. So difficult. It's like buses, they sort of come in fits and starts. Somebody gets it, or just as you've agreed it, people get nervous on budget, so you've then got the PMs in. I think everyone's selfishly trying to staff their own team. The researchers want the researchers, the designers want the designers, the product managers want the product managers. Please try to get people to work collaboratively to staff it in some sort of round robin way. Okay, we've now got product managers aren't the problem. Let's move on and fill up the designers. And that's because we did end up at different times just getting completely out of whack, which was difficult. And there's nothing more toxic than a product manager without enough people to talk to. They're like, I'm not basing this on Receipt Bank actually, but in a previous job, a product manager who doesn't have people to talk to just goes around getting narked and annoyed with everything. It's like, my idea is not progressing, so I'm just going to, get really annoyed and tell everyone else how annoyed I am. Product manager and loads of coders and no designer leads to an awful lot of really, really bad design. So getting this right is absolutely key. And I think trying to get the different people with their own selfish interests to care about aligning it is really, really key. And once we did that, I think it actually worked a bit better. You got a bit less selfless behavior going, well, look, I do have budget, but the bigger problem is your area is the gap. Because I spend most of my day saying there aren't enough designers, but I've just gone and hired 10 more engineers and not helped you fill your designer hole. So do try to get the teams working and monitoring the ratios and sort of championing that the ratio gets maintained rather than just championing staffing up their area. Easily said, hard to do. Certainly something that we've had difficulty doing. The other thing then is in staffing the management layers. So, in a hypergrowth scale up, you're trying to say, well, I need to put in place now the management layer I'm going to need for 18 months from now, because it'll take them 6 months to get involved. So you put that in place, but then obviously your plans get disrupted by reality. So you put in place all this, and then the next thing is, okay, COVID-19's hit, and suddenly you've got an amazingly high-class manager to manage 10 people, and you're saying, would you mind doing the photocopying? And they're like, what the fuck? Like, well, we can't afford to hire the 10 people to do this thing. So would you mind doing this job that you might recognize from 10 years ago in your career? Now, we've had loads of not COVID-19s, but much smaller things that just happen to your own company that disrupt the way in which you're going to do the hiring. So getting the right seniority levels to come in, not just the right skill sets right, but the right seniority level to come in at the right time, we also found particularly difficult. And we did a little bit of sort of flexing up and flexing down in that area. That's been 35 minutes from us. Alex was saying, continue sending questions. So we couldn't see it. Hopefully someone did send some questions.
They did.
And hopefully they weren't all, don't let them come back. On that, we'll open up. Let's kill the screen share, Divya, and then everyone's screen will go, oh, there we come. You can all see each other.
Well, thank you very much to you both. I thought it was really great. So I'll go straight to questions. So to Divya's point about gaining adoption versus working on new features, at what point as a product person, assuming you've done your beta MVP launch, when and how do you make the call that you need to pivot? I'll read that again. To Divya's point about gaining adoption versus working on new features, when and how do you make the call to pivot?
I'll grab that first. So I think one of the things we had, and this might be terrible, but we would have our product managers be building a feature, and then they might have been putting it through alpha and beta, and then at some point it's going to go in and it's going to say, yeah, let's get shitloads of people to do it. Okay, and there's this linear process: build it, decide that it's all good, and then let people to do it. But the feature that came out 3 years ago, they're not thinking about that. But that's where all the customers are. They're coming in to build the thing that made you famous in the first place 3 years ago. So we actually set up just a group of people who all they do is for features that were built long ago and that we know people love, just tweak and promote them so that people actually use them. I think we were very lucky initially that we just had a great product and people would just figure out how to use it themselves. You know, because you'd have highly motivated early adopters who'd come along, and we'd have lunch meetings, and they'd tell each other how to hack the product. They would tell each other, here's how you hack the product, here's how you get around. And they were very proud. As we got older and more into ordinary people, if it's not bloody obvious, they go, oh, fuck this shit, and don't adopt the product and don't use it. So we set up a separate group of people, put them on growth hacking courses and all that sort of stuff to say, you know, please just continue to drive adoption of this stuff, which is not going to be core new features. It's going to be finessing the feature, or it's going to be just promoting it or something else to drive adoption. So that was the main learning on that. It wasn't a case of when should you want to push it. It's who is going to every day wake up and be driving greater adoption of a feature that was built 5 years ago. That was the main thing we put it into. On the when would I be happy for people to really be pushing something? That's probably a harder question. So over to you, Divya.
Well, thanks, John. So I think the key change that happened, and it was quite noticeable almost, is when you go from having a roadmap where promoting adoption in particular is part of the same stream of work as building new features, adoption will always lose. It just always will, because there's always new shiny things to build. So that's why creating that separation of church and state, for us at least, was the solution. It was the way to kind of give it the attention it deserved. To the second question of when is it ready, I think it is about sort of measuring against a goal you set, which sounds fairly obvious, but actually really hard to do, because you have to have very clear goals in your beta, which we've learned maybe the hard way. Just putting your product out into the market and hoping that it flies tends to not work out, because you need to sort of have an organizational buy-in around a goal. So what is the goal for that beta? When is it a success? When do you move to the next stage? When do you go to full release? And actually, in addition to our adoption team, the other thing we did was sort of build out a release management function, which looked at exactly that sort of thing. So having clear goals, which were milestones not just for the product team, but for the whole business, that needed to be met before things advanced to the next stage or pivoted, as the case might be.
Thank you. So John, what advice would you give to somebody who's recently moved to a new company in a senior product capacity, trying to implement change and bring agility to the business if it's quite a waterfall environment?
First of all, write a note to yourself. If you didn't know this in advance, to next time know it in advance, I think would probably be the first thing. Oh, I know, I kind of done this a few, before, where we had sort of, probably not the whole company wasn't waterfall, but we had some stuff that was done waterfall, some stuff that was done agile. I think so here was the what I saw happening in a way outside of when I was doing it. It wasn't actually the tech org. The tech org was the most agile, the most willing to be agile. It was the company that was the biggest problem. And the root of all evil went back to sort of business planning and finance. Because what people would say is, line up and tell me a story where you pretend to be certain and make the most exorbitant claims. And the person who pretends to be most certain with the largest claim, I will grant you the project. So an enlightened person would come in and go, I really don't know. I think there's a sense that, there's a willingness to pay. We should investigate it. I only want to spend £20,000 to investigate. And they go, well, look, Jesus, John, we can't spend money in 20K chunks. We need to spend 20 million at a go. So this is no use to us. And by the way, you don't really seem to be that certain. The other guy came in yesterday, said he could take 5 million, could guarantee me 200 million of revenue. I was absolutely certain. So we're definitely going with him because, that's the kind of thing we need. So that promise big, ignore failure for as long as possible and build your career on being certain rather than listening is the thing you have to exit from the company before you can do anything else. So if you can get everyone to sort of read, actually, we had a great epiphany when people started reading Inspired. Buy them all copies of Inspired. And they should read it and go, God, am I that dick? That half of them mightn't even identify themselves in the beginning of the book. But very early on in the book, it goes like, here's a group of people who are feck useless. And hopefully they see themselves in it and go, oh God, maybe I won't ask that question. It'll take them 4 years to stop asking it. Because they're like, I know, John, I know, but. And you have to meet them halfway because you can't plan the finance of the business on 20K chunks. You have to say, well, look, what I'll do is I'll create a leash for myself where I will, give you these metrics. I'll give you these. And it's not going to be about this. I'm not asking to be, because we do have people who interpret Agile as, I can tell you nothing about anything. You just have to wait, No, we can look historically back and say, this person's not giving me anything. This person overestimates, this underestimates, can do all that sort of stuff. But I would say start with everything outside of tech. Start with the finance department and business planning. Don't let people who make exorbitant promises and sell certainty win, and try and do it there. Because if you don't start there, the reality is you'll end up with a, product and tech doing it and everyone else just looking on aghast, and you won't be really allowed to do it properly. So that's probably what I'd do. Then the other thing is, don't start measuring stuff that you don't do anything with. Be very clear on stuff, or else people are just going to view it just as pageantry. It doesn't go anywhere. The other thing is, at Expedia, God, I've been so long since I lived. I used to, 3 years ago, every example was Expedia, and now I stopped doing Expedia. There you go. Up until now, I've got 45 minutes into a conversation when I mentioned them. At Expedia, the best moment was when they changed what they celebrated. So we had a guy at Expedia who spent a couple of 100 million on a product that got instantly killed, and a guy who spent no money on one line of text. In the olden days, the guy who spent the 100 millions would have been the hero because he did a big thing. And the guy did the small thing. We're like, well, it was just a small thing, because we measured delivery, we measured output, we measured projects completed, milestones delivered. We started to say, well, okay, who moved the dial on what matters, and celebrate it. And then we started to celebrate this super clever people who moved the dial by doing feck all. Whereas beforehand, those people were like, well, you didn't do very much. So change the point of celebration. So if someone celebrates delivering something, you go, why are you celebrating? Get back and look at the dials. For all I know, you've fucked everything up. We've just launched a new mobile app and we're having beers. And you go, why on God's name are we having beers? Get back and look at the dials and see whether the thing you've launched is good or bad. We will celebrate when either you've told me this made it worse and we've learned something and we can put less into that thesis, or made it better. That's when we'll celebrate. So change the point of celebration to outcomes rather than completed delivery. And if you do that, everyone will get the message. And then everyone will have to go around saying, so what am I going to celebrate? The thing that you're going to move. What is the thing I'm going to move? Now, Divya's listening to this going, well, we didn't do that here, did we? You fucking fuck, So it's very easy to say. It's very, very easy to say. But you've got to find the thing. And it can't be revenue, because revenue is, you can't tie that to what someone actually did. So you need this driver tree that goes to what's something that the finance department cares about, something you can actually measure. It's much easier in a big B2C company like Expedia. We would know within hours if we'd made money or not. Whereas when you've got 3 B2B customers with 2 users and one of them you've talked to because she's a bit confused, that is much harder. So don't get me wrong, it's much harder at the lower volume space. But I'd say change the point of celebration and change the business planning function to be okay with less certainty. And then if you do those 2 things, then and then reward yourself with a company that isn't starting from waterfall and going to agile with the next turn, and then go back again and do the transformation. That would be my advice.
Thanks, John. How do you feel, probably a question to you both, how do you feel COVID-19 and remote working will affect agile ways of working in the future?
Actually, they probably do them the biggest service they've had. I think being able to work remotely will change our perception and ways of working generally. I think we've probably seen the light in some ways in the tech and product space, but less so in other parts of the organization. I think to John's point, this is forcing us almost to adopt ways of working that are conducive to not being co-located. So I think it will do wonders for the agile agenda in many ways. And in other ways, it poses new kinds of challenges because it's sort of one of the key drivers would be, face-to-face communication and sort of getting past that to a world of Slack and impromptu Zoom calls. I think it can be replaced. For us, very personally, in Receipt Bank, we found that actually because we've had remote teams, the transition has actually been better in so many ways because we've gone from some people being on Zoom calls to everyone being on Zoom calls, and that's been transformative because it levels the playing field in a way that we've never had before. So I think it will do wonders. I think it's probably going to open up a whole new way of working. So whatever Agile 2.0 looks like, and it gives us a sort of almost new manifesto on ways of working, which there wouldn't have been an appetite for otherwise. So I think it creates that appetite.
Okay.
I'll leave it at that.
John, do you have anything to add there?
No, I think the thing I'd double down on was that it's been easier to be all on a level playing field. When we were half and half in a room and half on a Zoom call, that was torturous. And actually, we only realize now just how bad it was for them.
Thank you. Is there a dedicated product owner who has responsibility of saying yes or no?
Sure, there is somewhere.
How do you?
So, is there a dedicated product owner responsibility? Yes or no? So, it's kind of interesting. We have everything kind of goes in layers. There's a sort of fractal. So, someone decided whether you were even allowed to ask the question, so someone above you said, well, we're going to set up a team that does this. And then, so the question is, someone above them said, okay, are they even allowed to work on this problem? And then you get down into within that problem and say, we've tried to move to not showing it. And we haven't done a great job of getting towards it, of kind of showing the agile team around a round table rather than as a pyramid. And we have sort of different views because, well, the product manager is the CEO, and there, people say, well, CEOs enable others. And so, no, CEOs just tell you what to do. So the analogy doesn't necessarily work. It depends on your view. We do try to give the sort of stack ranking to the PM. Product market fit, they'll ultimately get hung for. So if in the end no one wants it, the PM gets hung. Stack ranking, we say to the PM. But we've had PMs who've like, well, this is the way the UI should be. And Divya's like, with respect, you don't know what you're talking about. So no, you don't. You don't get the yes, no on that one, So, I think each person ends up with their own yes, no's. I don't want the product manager having the yes, no on everything. But from are we achieving product market fit, I want them to be hung for that. And on priority calls and stack ranking, then I want them hung for that. But for the most part, if you're having to resort to hard power, something's going horribly wrong. You know, that's really the thing. And we do. I mean, I've had product managers working for me who are, you know, brilliant dictators, but it just won't scale at all. And then others who've been great at sort of building consensus and you know, sort of empowering people, and that scales much better. But interestingly, very early on, the dictator can work an awful lot better. And then making that very tough call to not to continue to back them, not having them rise up in the org, and at some point having to get rid of them because they're culturally toxic, has been quite interesting. So, and we had that in two prior companies, people who could bulldoze stuff through, but ultimately you couldn't scale it. Don't know if that's a good answer by the book or not, but that's kind of where we're at.
Probably a question to you both. How do you drive innovation?
So I would love to not carve out innovation and to give people, you know, that people just take their mission and just find new ways to attack it. But as I said, one of the learnings was that just the urgent swamps the important. So we've had to kind of carve out new projects to look at things anew, because our ability to try to carve out a time allocation within a team just hasn't worked well enough. You know, I think if you're in a bigger company, you definitely have to carve it out. If you're in a really big company, you should probably just carve out the cash and buy shares in a smaller company. But definitely carving it out is regrettable, but I think kind of essential.
Yeah, I think the other aspect of it is also getting the right balance of people, because in any of those functions, there's some product managers, there's some product designers, researchers who are more comfortable in the maintenance and kind of functional change aspects of things, and others who are more comfortable in innovation and greater uncertainty. So I think having the right balance of people helps as well, because even if it isn't a carved out space, you'll just find some people naturally gravitating towards making some initiatives happen, whereas others who was trying to kind of move the needle more incrementally. And they're both very valuable to have. You do need that mix. You can't just have a bunch of innovators, because
Can I say, it's very toxic to let the word innovation get monopolized by a new product or a new promise.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's the worst thing you can do. Or have the word strategic be monopolized by a new product, because then everyone just wants to proliferate new promises and you just become a feature factory. So if to be innovative, it has to be a new promise, you'd say, well, Google Maps was done 10 years ago. I want to do Google Flaps. You know, you got to say, no, you know what? Innovation isn't, it has to be a new shiny ball, because the second you do that, people just want to work on new shit rather than the existing shit. And that's a disaster. Very few products come from people just skipping from promise to promise. So be wary having a strategic project, because it implies negative stuff on it elsewhere, and be wary of the sort of labeling innovation too much as the way to do something. So we might have a new revenue line we're going after, a new line of business or something, but try not to let the word innovation be monopolized by new, or else everyone just wants to leave what you've currently promised customers behind and make new promises, which very rarely leads to world class.
Thank you. How do you manage, actually, David, so with regards to slide number 11, very often you're not the only one involved in the bold decisions. How do you manage this decision-making with the sales or finance counterparts? How can it be a product manager or CPO decision?
We then need to look at what slide 11 is. Is it dry biscuits, or is it number 11? I loved you once. Is this the get rid of the customers, or is it the stop ramming shit in their mouth? It's the end of the day. It's the end of the day. Which one is it? Oliver, do you know? Can the questioner announce themselves? Which one was it?
This one, Clemens, do you want to ask this question if you're still online?
Sure, I am. Hi everyone, thank
Over
you
to
for
you.
hosting this. Yeah, thank you for hosting this. So if my question wasn't clear enough, it was in the context of getting rid of customers.
Okay, yeah, okay. No, you have referenced it kind of in the most logical way, probably. So how do you do it? I mean, like you've got to be working with the finance function, the marketing function, the sales function. There's no way around it. That's when somebody looks at a chunk of change, you identify, there is 4% of our top line on this segment, and we want to turn it off. You have to have a plan of how the rest of the company is going to grow fast enough to plug that hole. And we actually did. I'm quite proud of us. Actually, we did do this recently. We did kill some products, and we did kill some customers. Admittedly, the ones that were more obviously whack, like the ones that were like 3 years ago, we signed some bespoke thing. The guy on their side's gone. The guy on our side's gone. It's on Windows XP, and it requires a dog to bark for it to work. Like weird stuff. But it did have revenue against it. We did have to take roadmap time and put it towards it. But we said our agility will be much greater once we've dumped these, and we did quite a bit of that. So much that actually at one point the CRO said, "We've got to build something fucking new, not just switch things off, John." So we pushed it to the point where it was noticeable. But yeah, you just have to have them all involved. You can't do it surreptitiously. And what you certainly can't do is just have it happen without an explicit discussion. I think it has to have the explicit discussion. And that explicit discussion really leads to are all dollars of revenue equal? And if your company is acting like all dollars of revenue are equal, then the North Star metric probably isn't there in place, because those customers that you're trying to turn off probably shouldn't be featuring very well on that North Star metric.
Thank you. What is your approach to road mapping? What level do you feel comfortable sharing with clients? How do you feed back on individual client asks? Not everything can go on the roadmap.
So I don't want the sales team telling them anything. To a large extent, it's like sell what you've got on the bloody truck. Because the second I tell them something, they go, "Oh, well, why don't we wait for that?" etc. So for the most part, and this depends by company. Like some companies are, you're doing enormous high value customers. If you're giving you 1 million, 2 million, we for the most part are people who are giving us a few thousand. Okay, so I don't want huge pre-selling going on, because I think our product is already bloody brilliant. We're 94 on UK Trustpilot. We've got a shit hot product. We really do. I'm not just saying that, but it's true. We're a really excellent product. It's really good, and most of our customers don't have it. So don't try to add on another promise. If I said we've got the cure for cancer, and next week is a can of Coke, you buy the cure for cancer now. You don't wait for the can of Coke. So we've already got a very compelling thing. I don't want people having to use stuff that is not locked in, is not certain, to try to complete the sale. Full stop. So we try to not have that. We try to talk to problems that we will solve for people, new areas we might go into, but try not to have them pre-selling too much. The other area then, to be brutal, is we're just not great yet at nailing the delivery of stuff in a timely fashion. So I look on with envy at other people who can say, and in Q3 we'll be bringing you this, and Q4 we'll bring you that. Well, we sometimes have 12-month delays, and I'm not happy with somebody quoting back to me, well, in 2018 you said you'd have that, and now it's 2028, John, and where is it? So I think if you're more confident in your ability to get things out of the pipe, and that those things in the pipe are going to come when you say they're going to come, and they're not at risk of you having to change your mind, fine, by all means. But we've not got to that level of comfort. But I can understand that it'd be very different if you were a much more large enterprise sale and you need to give them more visibility. What I've found is you get enormous love from the customers, not by telling them what's going to come, but letting them feel like they're shaping what's going to come, and that you're listening to them. And I think that can be huge. So when you know you're definitely going to do 3 things, but you're not sure in which order you should drop them, involving customers at that point is great, because they really, I mean, I get flattered into someone saying, you know, like, we're launching a new widget. Would you be interested? And I'm like, oh, yeah, no, of course. I'd love to be on the inside track of some new cool thing. So that, but that's different. You know where you're going, and you want to get them to try to stack rank and prioritize it, which is a little bit different. But you know, committing to stuff and then them saying, well, we didn't make the sale because you didn't drop it. It's like, no, you should never have promised it. You should have just sold it as it is, you know, and it's going to get better afterwards. That'd be my my gut instinct on it.
How big is your backlog if you are able to test and kill multiple ideas before it makes it to the backlog?
I didn't go there, Divya. No, so happy about. So I'm, you know, it sounds like it's like a positive or a negative. So what we're trying to get to is having enough researchers and enough prototyping capability to have a ratio of explore more things than you're going to go on and build. So I don't think it's a matter of how big the backlog is. It's because I'm sure everyone can, you know, if they wanted to, could have a backlog that could fill the next 25 years. It's your ratio of people who can do discovery to the ratio of people who are going to do development. That's the key thing, I'd say. So we're now at, well, it probably it changes all the time. Every number I have gets proven wrong because things move around. But we started to get up towards a sort of 1-to-1 ratio between product managers and researchers, which enabled it that actually we could do proper discovery. So we're selling the dream of we're discovering 2 things and implementing 1. Previously, we discovered no things and we're implementing 1 and then just trying to find out why it didn't work after we built it. But we've done a very good job with a great ex-employee now who really helped us on that journey, called Danielle Tracer. And she's left us now. Her real name's not Tracer, but she was great, and she really brought us on that journey. And you know, it's great when you get somebody who's able to really stick with it and say, look, this is going to work, because it takes a long time. You know, like Divya has built up our, you know, design and now research, but to get people to actually stop doing amateur design, to not view product management as coming up with a kind of an idea of a design and trying to get it built. There's a lot of letting go that the product managers had to do in order to become pure product managers, because when they were initially hired, there was them and the developer. They had to be the researcher, they had to be the designer, and they took great pride in all these things. And as we've grown, we've been able to specialize out, but some active letting go. It's very hard for them to let go if they have nothing else to grab onto. So if you don't have a North Star metric, if you aren't measuring outputs, they don't really have anything to grab onto. They're like, well, other than just designing something that's going to get built, what am I doing? Because I'm not measuring anything else. So yeah, but I'd say it's the ratio rather than the amount of stuff in the backlog. It's that staffing ratio. And every now and then people do look and go, oh, there's an awful lot of researchers and designers. You know what I mean? We go, yeah, because we're trying to, you know, manufacture hits here, not just play music.
Thank you. To John, how much percentage of our overall effort / budget do we need to allocate for product discovery phase, and where must we put that boundary?
I'm going to throw that one to Divya, because it's hard, but B, also Divya heads up all of our research and design, so she's very key on the discovery and then sees it through to the end. So.
I don't think that you can attribute sort of a percentage to how much of your time or energy should go into discovery. It's more a case of, if you're not doing a discovery, what is the cost of not doing it, that you need to try and understand. And I think that often the cost is spending a lot of time building solutions to problems that don't exist, building solutions to problems that you think could exist, but don't actually manifest in any kind of real value to the business. So I'd almost we don't try and frame it as you should spend 30% of your time every week as a product team doing discovery. That's never the target. We're very much running things in parallel. You're not trying to do discovery for 6 months and then have one prototype to build at the end of it. They're very much happening concurrently, and you're trying to kind of discover things about things that are being built and released into the market as you speak, and then things that are coming up down the line. So I think it's more finding a cadence within the team, that discovery isn't something that you have to find time for or find bandwidth for, but is just part of your cadence of activities. It's part of your day-to-day things. What we found useful is making sure that everyone from engineering to product management to research and design is having a conversation, not just about things that are being delivered and shipped or close to being delivered and shipped, but also having that conversation about delivery. So really, if you had to put a number to it, it's probably spending, an equal amount of time on both those ways, rather than trying to kind of find or carve time in any way.
Thank you. Point 2 was give ownership to cross-functional teams. How do you do this and still manage to focus on strategic objectives?
Well, we tried to give teams an actual proper bona fide mission, which would be achieved through a mixture of strategic and tactical. So that was the way we did it. So there wasn't a case of, that it self-solved for that problem. What we got wrong was we set them up as autonomous teams, but in fact there was nothing in the org that actually enabled them to be autonomous. The code base was just a spaghetti mess of interconnected stuff. So we had fake autonomy, which wasn't good. So it took us at least 12 months to start building out towards real autonomy, which was an actual code-based problem as much as anything else. That simply everyone was blocking everyone else because nothing had been layer separated. All the code is in the giant monolith. Yeah.
Can you talk through a recent feature? How did you get the idea and how did you do discovery?
It was my idea and it was great. That's the key takeaway. I think that everyone would.
So John said to me once, probably wise words that I will definitely repeat someday. If something goes right, I'll take credit for it, and if something goes terribly wrong, you're responsible. Which is in a nutshell, I think how we think of these things. But more seriously, so we've been working on sort of a lot of things to do with banking data, and often these areas, they're quite popular with fintechs at the minute. It's a hot topic. We unfortunately don't come at it from as glamorous an angle as some of the neobanks. But where we want to try and focus our efforts on is understanding that getting this kind of banking data and an accounting product, what are the key challenges, the key problems you want to solve. So part of our discovery process will involve, of course, doing more generic workplace observations, understanding workflows, but we also want to sort of do very early rapid prototyping. So whether it's testing a number of different utilizations of this sort of data, or actually putting different concepts in front of our users to get sort of very real-time feedback and validate these quite quickly before we invest in building in them. That's typically what we would do with most of our kind of discovery pieces of work. But at the same time, there isn't really a formula or an equation that we follow for everything. It is very much on the nature of the problem itself and where the objective is being set. So whether it's coming from John's head, which, as he'll tell you, is almost everything on the roadmap, or whether it's coming through some of the cadence we put in place by getting research to lead on finding some of these issues and problems for users.
I think some of the most interesting things are it's the things that we don't do that I think are the most interesting use cases. We did a thing recently where someone said, this is what we need. We need to be able to do this. We're very, very certain. And we went off and did research, and the research said, no, this is not the problem at all. One, you came with a solution, not a problem. We've tried to engineer back out the problem that you were trying to state. We've researched it, and your solution comes in the 10th place to all the more pressing problems. We're going to work on these other more pressing problems with better solutions. God, did they hate that? Oh, build my thing. So, well, okay, well, your thing isn't the solution to that problem. So maybe it's to a different problem. So maybe is this the problem that you're trying to state? Oh, yeah, that's it. And go, okay, well, then we'll go off and do the research and come back, and lo and behold, probably come out differently. The really interesting, this process for the features is the thing that stops solutions coming out of someone's head and going on to be implemented, and forces someone to identify problems and opportunities and then stack rank solutions against it. They're the really interesting ones. And we're joking about things coming out of my head, but like nothing, I've been really trying, if anyone asks me my opinion, this is the opinion of one random person. Do you know what I mean? So I'll give you my feedback, but I'm one random person. And given that we're all internal users and have seen it before, our opinions are terrible. And that's one of the great things actually about celebrating outcomes, is that once you move to actually having outcomes, it really democratizes it, because people realize that they're not gods. That, we used to bet 10 pence on, sort of this one win, that one, and you realize you don't make any money because you're terrible at predicting what's going to win. And then once you do that, then the hippo kind of goes out of the room when there's actually something other than opinion to input to the conversation,
Thank you. And final question that's come in for the evening. As a product manager working in an agile team, how can I effectively manage the UX team who often tend to design things out without focusing on designing in smaller MVP chunks?
I think Divya will say, you need to show more respect to that UX team. I think, that's it, no doubt they have a question in another forum going, my God, my product manager got no bloody vision and won't see things through to an actual user experience. They're just they're atomizing things to bloody UI elements.
Yeah.
Divya, I'll leave that one to you.
I think the key thing is actually keeping the focus of the whole team, and sort of the cross-functional team on the outcome of what they're trying to achieve. Because often we're trying to build a beautiful house when we actually don't even know if anyone's ever going to come live in it. And I think getting to that level of clarity, of purpose inside the team is probably crucial. This doesn't mean that you don't end up still with having the kind of balance, an MVP versus what you might want to do in iteration 3. I think the bit that from a UX perspective, I think most designers or researchers would struggle with is moving beyond the MVP. And from a product manager's perspective, you want to try and get something to market as quickly as possible to not lose a competitive advantage. So I think it's defining what that MVP is, and also the immediate plan on iterating beyond the MVP, which is the bit that I think at least most teams that I've been with always struggle with. So we're very good at kind of cutting down scope and taking a knife or sometimes a sledgehammer to a prototype to bring the scope down to something manageable. We're less capable or less able often to articulate how we actually do bring it back to being something that is genuinely lovable. I think that compromise only comes with having a visible breakdown of what are the must-haves and what are the should-haves. And I think we started to do a lot of that internally. And it seems like a very simple solution, but it's transformative in so many ways, because you're not saying that you're this baby that you've put a lot of love and effort into and gotten a lot of feedback from, and users have told you is exactly what they want, will die a painful death in the hands of a butcher. It's instead then saying that you get the simplest solution that gets you to product market fit and iterate on it.
I've seen in both in Receipt Bank now and in the product company, the enormous transformative power of having a proper library. So we had, in the last 12 months, people would do designs and people would go, what sort of cretin are you? Look at this design. It's got, it's so elaborate. It's got all this fancy shit. You're stupid. You can't do this. This will take forever to build. Move on 12 months. We've got a proper library. and it just automatically assumed that, of course, you know, a list comes with a sort order widget, and a list comes with a thing, and all things like that. So someone designed something too minimal, you're like, oh, you fucking stupid, you should have looked at the library. Blah, blah, blah. So it's been amazing to watch the transformative power of minimal when there's an actual library. It really has been stunning. We spent so much time on ways to hack something down to nothing, then not build it and everyone lose heart. If you haven't implemented or aren't planning to implement a sort of a reusable library, then please do, because it's been amazingly brilliant. I think that's fair to say, Divya. And to Alex Perry, sorry, I asked Alex Perry privately, is he Alex Perry from Bupa, who I know, but he's not. So apologies, Alex Perry, can't type. Yeah, so I would definitely do that, because it took a lot of the stress out of it, I'd say.
Thank you very much. Well, that draws us to a close. Divya, John, thank you very much for this evening. It's a pleasure to have you speak. Really enjoyed it. So cool. Hope to have you come back and speak for us again soon. Thanks for everyone else for joining in, and thank you very much for your questions. Without this great product community, nothing like this could happen. We at Oliver Bernard feel like these are really, really important, especially at this time. So do keep an eye out. We've got events running, we've got Agile London every Wednesday now until the end of June, and Product London running every Tuesday until the end of June. We do run 14 meetups as an agency, and they're becoming really, really popular, especially in this time. If you're looking for work, if you want to host or speak at one of these events, my name's Alex Scriven, and you can find me quite easily on LinkedIn. So do give me a shout. Toby and or Sina as well also work in the sort of Agile team. I'm not making any promises. The recruitment market is quiet at the moment for obvious reasons, but we, as the agency of Oliver Bernard, want to do our very best to help you. So if you are looking, do reach out. But that's everything for this evening. Thank you once again, Divya. Thank you, John. And I wish everyone a good evening. Thanks very much.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.